It was October 2nd, 2020. And my husband had just been anointed within the last hours. He was declared brain dead by the hospital, and they wanted to take his organs for organ donation. At this point, I chose to start strategizing. So first, my children and I went into prayer, and we started discerning what would be the best next steps. We first really needed to see him. We needed to get into the hospital because he's on medical kidnap in the hospital, in a lockdown hospital, being held hostage. We've not had the ability to see him, touch him, be around him. No way of connection with my husband. And everything has been being told to me, and I'm supposed to make a decision that way. That does not work. I've not been given medical information enough to make a proper decision. According to Catholic teachings, we don't need to keep our beloveds on a ventilator because that's considered extenuating care. But when there is potential that given a period of time they can recover, we have that duty to respect the dignity of their life. So now that he received his anointing and his soul was taken care of, my next step was to take care of his medical care properly, not according to the medical staff, but according to Catholic teachings, and also make sure that we are able to see him and have that visitation with him. So I started making phone calls. I called family, I called friends, I called associates, I called people that they referred me to, and this was on a Friday. So I was making all these calls trying to figure out what is the next steps, what do I have available to me. So what I found out was that I had the availability to his medical records online, and that most hospitals have a online system that I would need to get a password to get access to his records. So that was the first step of the journey, to learn how to do that. The second step, I learned that during the lockdown that they had access to placing an iPad next into the room, or a computer, a laptop in the room, so that you could visit with your family member that's held hostage, medically kidnapped in the hospital, and you have no access to them. I was told that the hospital was on complete lockdown. So there was no way I would be able to get in. I thought of ways of sneaking in, but my children, I didn't want to jeopardize. Many people don't realize that there's medical kidnap going on in hospitals with adults that are dying, seniors, or adults that are special needs, as well as children. It's adult and children welfare, right? They actually have these so-called medical professionals in the hospitals that are supposedly trained to figure out abuse and neglect in medical situations, and they're contracted into the hospitals by the adult child welfare system for protective services. And our system is extremely corrupt. You can see more stories on these kind of situations, with specifically more so for children at medicalkidnap.com. And there's other groups out there that you can do your own research and discover this heinous crime that hospitals will actually take hostage a person and remove anybody else out of the hospital and take control of that person without court order and without criminal activity and without civil activity of wrongs, or without child protective or adult protective services. They themselves do this and hold them hostage, and then they go about forging the medical records to get what they want, and then they go to court, or hand that person over to psych, or hand them over to child or adult protective services, and that is what takes place. Why would they even do this? Upon much research, they actually get paid off. They get paid off if somebody's receiving any kind of state funds, disability, senior, Medicaid, any state funding for insurance, for disabilities, for senior care, for child care, any kind of that funding, even funding from parents who are separated, divorced legally, all of that funding, they actually, they don't get that funding, but the state contracted adult child protective services obtains that funding, including our disability, Social Security funds directly from our check. They get those funds from the government, and those funds are filtered, and they're paying people off. So family court is paid off. The hospitals, they're paid off in the by the insurance companies. They're paid off for doing medical tests. They're paid off for selling organs. Or selling any human parts. They're paid off for any of their tests, or even testifying in court. They are paid off. So all of these things are all about money that the hospital operates on, right? So they are a corrupt system that we're facing and experiencing. So I had to start strategizing. How was I going to get in there? And I realized it was in the best interest not to bring my children in. And so then my children, because of the trauma that they experienced and not being able to see daddy, to go visit daddy, to even see daddy on camera, it left them not wanting me to be separated from them. They were so dealing with trauma. So I had to choose that visitation option was out in me attempting to go up in the evenings. And when there was lesser like restrictions and lesser people around. But what I chose to do was to follow their ways now that I have my husband anointed, to continue on with um, advocating for my husband's welfare, because if I stepped foot in, they would have um, declared me not capable of making decisions for my husband. And so it was in the best option for me to just sit back and focus on having the visitations via the online Zooming. And so that's what we chose. So I reached out, and I had no idea that I had a person that handles the care plans in the hospital. So I had to search out that person. I found that person on his floor that handles his care plan and oversees his case. I talked real sweetly to the person and professionally, and I was able to achieve getting the visitation and set up so that we could have regular visitation with my husband via Zoom. So our first visit was October 2nd, late in the day. And we recorded all of these videos unbeknownst to them. And what we discovered is that my husband's wrists were tied down to the metal, the metal bars that go along when you're laying down, again, that go parallel to your arms in a hospital bed. His wrists were actually, and elbows, but his wrists specifically, they were tied down. Okay. So my question is, if he's, as the doctor said earlier that morning, saying that he's not responding, he's brain dead, he's not acting, he's not moving, he's not anything, yet why did they have him tied down by his wrists? Okay, so lots of contradiction here going on. And then we started communicating with him, and he was on a ventilator and he was silent. But as we started speaking to him, he started thrashing around. And mind you, his one side, the stroke hit. So that side was not as active, but the other side was completely active. And he was moving his head back and forth and moving his legs. And I could see him picking up his leg. And on that side that was good, I could see all of that going on. When we started praying the rosary, I saw him actually calm down, like as if he was participating and praying with us, still moving, but not as much. I saw when we were playing his favorite music. I knew that music is one of those important things with a brain injury that helps. So I played his favorite Christian music, and all of a sudden I'm seeing him moving around again. So we talked with him and all that, and we stayed on a very long time that first day. It was so incredibly heartbreaking to not be there, to not touch, to not hold, to not hug, to not feel his warmth and his hug, just to just not experience his presence in person. It was so difficult. And so that day we strategized, and we were able to have the visitation, and we saw that they were lying to us. we saw that they were lying to us, completely lying to us. And then we then started calling a doctor we knew, and he told us it was way too early to be making such medical decisions of pulling him off the ventilator, because with strokes, there can be a point of slow recovery. And so he said, don't pull him off the ventilator. Even if I wasn't willing to do brain or organ transplant or organ donation, he said it's way too early. They're rushing it, and they didn't give you enough information. You need the XYZ and all this information. Okay. Then I was referred to other people, and I started sharing the story publicly on my husband's Facebook page, and people are coming forward, and they knew things, and they would private message me, and we'd get on the phone and I'd talk with them about it. So we were getting a strategy built, how to handle his medical, how to get things moving on that part of it to handle it appropriately. My biggest gift was that I knew and I met them in person. Mary and Bobby Schindler. Mary is the mom of Terry Schiavo. Bobby is the brother to Terry Schiavo. Terry Schiavo was the woman many years ago that was euthanized by court order in Florida because her husband was forcing it. And her family, Mary and Bobby, and their family and friends on their side was trying to stop the forced euthanization because she was not on a ventilator. She was not on a feeding tube. She was communicating with them with her eyes and all. And she had a brain damage, but she was still communicating. She was still alert. So I knew that after they had euthanized it, Bobby and Mary had started this nonprofit organization called Terry Schiavo Life and Hope Network. And they specifically help with things like ventilation, feeding, nutrition, fluids, for anybody in those situations that are being denied or are not being properly medically cared for in those specific areas. So I moved forward and made that call to them and asked for them to call me back because I knew that they were going to be my one major hope of fighting for my husband's dignity of life. And so that's what I moved forward on doing. I also made my calls to the hospital to make sure that I knew what was being done, but I also compared notes to my brother-in-law, what he was getting from the hospital. So we were both making phone calls to the hospital. So that was October 2nd, Friday, and it was a stressful day. It was an emotional day. It was a day of, yes, we achieved getting him anointed through the grace of God. And now it is about fighting for the dignity and the right. We did need to get in there if they were going to pull him off the ventilator to get our goodbyes. But right now it was not the timing for that in particular. I needed more conversation, more information from the hospital, what was actually going on, and more time to see how things would progress. So that's the story that ended October 2nd, 2020 on a Friday. And I will share what Saturday, October 3rd looks like on my next video and the new journey of challenges that we might have faced. So thank you so much for listening. You have a blessed day.